Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Beyond Dope. We are going to go ahead and start off this episode like we start off every episode with the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Today's reading is page 88 in the Big Book, Continue to Take a Personal Inventory, 12 Steps and 12 Traditions. The spiritual axiom referred to in the 10th step, and that quote is, every time we are disturbed, no matter what the cause, there's something wrong with us. That also tells me that there are no exceptions to it. No matter how unreasonable others may seem, I am responsible for not reacting negatively. Regardless of what is happening around me, I will always have the prerogative and the responsibility of choosing what happens within me. I am the creator of my own reality. When I take my daily inventory, I know that I must stop judging others. If I judge others, I am probably judging myself. Whoever is upsetting me most is my best teacher. I have much to learn from him or her, and in my heart, I should thank that person. AA thought for the day. Did I put too much reliance on any one member of the group? That is, do I make a tin god out of some one person? Do I set that person on a pedestal? If I do, I am building my house on sand. AA members have clay feet. They are all only one drink away from a drunk, no matter how long they have been in AA. This has proved to be true more than once. It's not fair to any member to be singled out as a leader in AA, and to always quote that member on the AA program. If that person should fail, where would I be? Meditation for the day. You must always remember that you are weak, but that God is strong. God knows all about your weakness. He hears every cry for mercy, every sign of weakness, every plea for help, every sorrow over failure, every weakness felt and expressed. We only fail when we trust too much to our own strength. Do not feel bad about your weakness. When you are weak, that is when God is strong to help you. Trust God enough and your weakness will not matter. God is always strong to save. Prayer for the day. I pray that I may learn to lean on God's strength. I pray that I may know that my weakness is God's opportunity. So, what does that mean to us? To me, personally, it is, when you do your daily inventory, it is extremely important to remember, just because you're kicking ass, right? Just because you've got 5 years in, or a year in, or even a couple months in, you start to feel good. You start to feel like you got this, and it goes back to, which I'm sure if you're listening to this, you've heard all about there's being confident, and then there's being overconfident, and you have to find that fine line and walk it very carefully. And as long as you're reminding yourself every day, and a lot of it has to do with how you talk to people, because even, when we talk in home group, or when I talk to a couple of my buddies, it's very easy to sound preachy rather than just try to give somebody advice about something that works for you. And I think, when we sound preachy, it's just not a good look for anybody, really. You could feel that way sometimes and maybe catch yourself, or others can view you in that light, which is never good. But, do I put too much reliance on one member of the group? Okay, so what I had written to the side for that one is usually, I think my problem, and it goes back to what we talked about last week, was, codependency. And I always find that one person to lean on, typically when I'm in any setting. I have, that one person at work, or that one person at AA, or maybe that one family member. So I think we do that, and it's normal to do that. But, at the end of the day, you really have to think about what you're doing, and, who are we relying on? Is it fair to rely on them as much as we do? And then the comment about, am I making a tin god out of one person? Do I put that person on a pedestal? I think that we all do that, definitely. But it's important, and this is where your God or your higher power comes into play. As long as you have, in my experience, as long as I have a good experience, a good relationship with him, then I'm in a good place. I there's times throughout the day where I'm, say a quick prayer, or I could literally talk to myself, which I do quite frequently. And, I do that with some people that I lost too in the past, where, a song will come on the radio or something will remind you of that person, and you'll just talk out loud to them, or say a prayer. But it's important to have that, spirituality and that faith in recovery. At least it's been important to me. And another thing that this automatically makes me think of is, maybe I don't say this enough, but because I do this both in the podcast, and I do this, when I talk to some of my AA buddies, or when we get together for a meeting. I could get extremely kind of preachy, and I don't mean to do that. What I'm trying to say is what works for me, what has worked for me in the past, what works for me currently, and hopefully you take something away from that and you can use it in your situation. And it's important to remember, I'm just trying to give you tips and ideas that worked for me. There's no, in my experience at least, there's no one way to get sober. There's a million different paths that lead you to sobriety. Some people get it on the first turn. Some people get it on the 50th. Some people, rely on MATs to help them get through. Some people don't. Some people, there's just a million ways, guys. So it's important to remember that, this isn't a step-by-step book as much as it is just, maybe little tidbits of information that hopefully you find useful or helpful. The last part, the prayer for the day, learning to lean on God's strength. In sobriety, I think we all have this idea when we're addicts that no matter what the world throws at us, once we get sober, it'll be fine. Look at all this shit that I've dealt with in addiction. As long as I'm sober, everything else is going to be fine. And when you compare the problems, maybe that's true, especially for most people, but we're also dealing with, we're dealing with arrests, and, our criminal history is probably catching up with us when it comes to jobs, or, we're dealing with our past, right? So those problems that we just didn't think about in addiction, for years, we really only had one thing to worry about, and that was getting high. That was getting high and figuring out how to get high, maybe coming up with some crazy schemes or whatever. But now we're sober and everything is catching back up to us. So it's not realistic to think that everything is always going to be okay, especially when we're trying to put our lives back together. And for me, learning to lean on God's strength is huge. I have a bad day, and I have to just trust that as long as I'm sober, it's not going to be that bad. Everything is going to work out. I have to trust that my higher power has a plan for me, and that with prayer and patience, everything's gonna fit somehow. And it doesn't always, seem like that at all. And tests, I find that, I'm not sure if, it's your higher power or just the way the universe works, but I find that these little sobriety tests have a way of coming up at just the perfect times when you're, maybe jobless and somebody from your past reaches out, trying to front you dope to, go back on and start selling, or just anything like that. Or, you had just the worst day ever, and somebody comes up to you in a parking lot out of nowhere, somebody that maybe you don't even know them, and just says, "Hey, you like to party?" and tries to give you a sample of something. I mean, I find these tests to be extremely conveniently placed, and it's our job to pass those tests, because you're always going to have them. You're always going to be tested. So that's important to remember. And it's important when you're tested to learn to lean on God's strength. Just fortify your relationship with your higher power. Learn to laugh about those coincidental tests and how just crazy the timing of it all is. And trust in God's plan. Okay, so today's email, we received an email from Bradley in Cincinnati, Ohio. It was kind of a comment and a question. I'm just going to read the whole thing. With all the trauma and drugs in such close proximity at such a young age, it's almost like you didn't stand a chance. I hope you take time to appreciate how far you've come and how hard it must have been. My question, what do you do to keep your mind busy, especially early on in sobriety? He goes on to talk about how his cousin has had a problem with alcohol and drugs for the past 7 years, and that his family has tried absolutely everything. And when he got to talking to his cousin, that was one of his biggest problems. He said that he would go to rehab, and when he was in rehab, and on a schedule, everything's fine. But then once he gets out of that rehab bubble, he comes home, he's got all this time to think. He wasn't working, so he had a hard time staying sober because, and of course he did. I mean, when you don't have that schedule anymore out of rehab, you're gonna have problems. And again, there's no real answer to this. I mean, but I asked that question to a couple people at a meeting the other night, and some of the stuff we came up with was, me personally, meditation is huge for me. I mean, just take 10 minutes out of your day and sit and, just focus on your breathing. Journaling for me is also huge. That's just one of my favorite parts of the day, is just journaling about my day, or going back in my journals and reading, things from, 8 years ago or 6 years ago. And if you don't keep a journal, start one. There's no time like the present. I mean, there's times when I write in it every day. There's other times when I don't write for months, but I always pick the same journal back up and keep going. Another thing is exercise. Exercise is always good, but you want to keep a schedule. Even once you get out of rehab, keep a schedule. Clean the house. God knows how dirty and gross we were in addiction. I'm sure there's something to clean. Do artwork. Play an instrument. If you don't play an instrument, maybe take lessons. I understand coming out of rehab, there's probably not a lot of money and your support might be lacking a little bit, but keeping a schedule and finding support is huge. Find somebody that you could talk to every day, whether it's in meetings, start that schedule with maybe do 30 meetings in 30 days like they suggest, or some people even do 60 meetings in 30 days, hit a afternoon one up and an evening one up. And you make a lot of friends that way. You find a lot of phone numbers that you can call when you need something that way. Just learn how to spot the good people to talk to in AA from the ones you want to stay away from, and that's hard, because you definitely can't judge them by by their cover. Volunteer work is extremely gratifying. Animal shelters always need help. And, like I said, connect with others, in sobriety, at meetings, but, not just at meetings, hold a meeting, at any same place. It could be a restaurant or, maybe one of your houses, have a home group at home, right? Hobbies. What did you do when you were sober? What did you do before you started using? And that's really hard for a lot of us because true sobriety really, it takes a long time for us to get it. And, we have to figure out who we are again. So really think back, last time you were sober, what did you like to do? And, what are your passions? What have you always wanted to try? Get comfortable trying new shit. And it could be hard though. I do understand that, but keep a schedule is the most important in my opinion. Keep a schedule and go to meetings. And thanks again to Bradley for the comment and question. If anybody has any questions or comments, please reach out to us on Facebook or beyonddopepodcast@gmail.com. So last time we ended with, me and Amber were taking Opanas and Dilaudids. Jason's father's medications had just recently got up. We had just lost Brad from an IED over in Iraq, and this doctor over in Beechwood had prescribed me a lot of benzos, like a ridiculous amount of benzos. I was on Xanax bars and Klonopin at the same time. This doctor knew I was drinking. I mean, when you look back on it, it's crazy that a health professional knew that I was drinking alcohol and prescribed me that many benzos. But it was like the Wild West in 2009 when it came to drugs and opiates. I mean, I'm sure it was probably worse in the 90s, but it was still bad in the early 2000s. So every week we would go pick up, just for numbers' sake, I'm going to say 25 Opana 60s. And I don't know, we'll say 50 Dilaudid 4 milligrams. And very quickly we got to the point of, not selling any of them. because, for a little bit there, it was kind of a step up from the OxyContin that we were doing. So we didn't have to take them all like we were with the OxyContin. Anytime you change drugs a little bit, you could take a little bit less. Even sometimes if maybe they're not necessarily more potent, they're just a different drug. At least that's what I found. So every week we would go pick up these drugs, and we would run through them like crazy. And this went on just with the Opanas, it went on for at least 2 years. The big change was when Jason's dad started getting caught for drinking alcohol, because they would randomly piss test him, and he was on so many meds. So I really think that the doctors just didn't want to be responsible for him anymore, because doctors were just starting to be held accountable for stuff like this. And I think a lot of people, because I met a lot of people in rehab that this happened to as well, where as 2010, 2011, 2012 comes around, these doctors are starting to panic, and the patients that were prescribed the most are starting to be cut down or cut off completely. I mean, the doctors are looking for a reason to cut these guys off. And it was a particularly messy case with Jason's dad, because the doctors were harsh. I mean, they cut him down literally to nothing overnight. And this led to him drinking a lot more. And I mean, I don't think it was safe or ethical for them to do what they did. But he went on. I mean, especially when you think about it, the pills that he had were enough to support 2 terrible drug addicts and Jason's father. So, I mean, it was a lot of medication that was just stripped away pretty much overnight. And I mean, we did get a lot of them, but I mean, he had, probably 3/4, maybe a little less than that, to himself every month. I mean, there would be times when I would go back over there and offer him another deal, or, maybe even pay cash, or, trade. He'd tell me to bring over a few bottles of vodka or something, and, I would trade him for a few pills. After some complaining, and I think their main goal here was to get him down a lot, but they did it in such an irresponsible way. But after maybe like a week or two, he ended up getting his pills back. But what they did is, this was around the time when OxyContin and Opanas were getting reformulated, so you couldn't snort them anymore. You couldn't take the coating off, break them up, and snort them or shoot them anymore. So you pretty much had to eat them unless you wanted to go through this elaborate process. And it was crazy. It was way too much time. It wasn't the same effect. They just weren't the same pills. You couldn't get, at nearly as much for them on the street. It was not a good time to be a drug addict. Okay. So when this happened, everything went nuts. We tried to maintain on just the Dilaudids, because those were the same. You could still break those up. Just the big ones, like the really, really, really high class, maybe not high class, but the very powerful opiates. OxyContin and Opana they had this new way of making them that made it so you could not break them up. All the other ones were pretty much the same at this time. So, Percocets, Dilaudids, you could still break them up. You could still do what you wanted with them. So with the Dilaudids we got from him, we tried to maintain, but that was impossible. We would go through what we had in a day, maybe two, and then we're trying to eat these, take them orally, these 40 milligram Oxycontin, because when the doctors did give him his medications back, they had cut him down drastically, and you weren't able to snort them. So it was a 1-2 punch, I guess. It was like I said, a terrible time to be an addict. So a bunch of my friends, basically whoever you ended up buying your pills off of back then, called you up, and pretty much in the next day of the shit hitting the fan and the scramble for the last few Oxycontins, and people charging, double per pill and all this crazy shit. Around this time, any dealer that you have or that is calling you, asking you if you want heroin. And that was the first time that I tried heroin. Me and Amber were at home, and Jason actually had tickets to, at the time, the Guardians. They were the Indians. So me, Jason, and my little brother Evan took the RTA bus down to watch the Guardians game. But before we left, we had my buddy Mick. He sold a lot of weed with me. We sold a lot of pills to each other back and forth. We would play poker all the time. He was like my, the one guy in our friend group that would gamble like I gambled, and I mean, we had a lot in common. We were always trying to look out for each other, but also, when one of us was down, $2,000 playing poker, we could rely on the other one to, front us $500 for a week, because we knew that, we would make it right back and give it right back to the person. We were drug addicts, but we weren't terrible drug addicts yet. But Mick was getting there quick. Mick was getting there fast, and I was right behind him. Mick had already been doing heroin, so when I asked him for it, and I mean, you got to understand, and I'm sure a lot of you do, because a lot of you are probably drug addicts, but for those of you who aren't, I was one of these people who viewed pills as something that was totally different than heroin. It was like, I'm just doing Oxycontin, when it's the same thing. It is chemically the same thing, and it makes you feel the exact same way, especially when you're withdrawing. Honestly, in my opinion, I think Oxycontin withdrawals were worse than heroin. But at the time, for me, it was a big mental thing. Like, I remember the first time me and Amber did it, we snorted it, and I was so nervous. I was scared. Which is crazy, because I had been doing, 2 80 milligram Oxycontins, Dilaudid in between, Xanax in between. I had been, effectively accidentally trying to kill myself for years, but here I am nervous about this half a line of heroin, but it was just a mental barrier that I never thought I would break down. But we broke it down. We ran that bitch over. We lit it on fire. And that opened up a whole new door, really. We snorted it for a very long time. Amber had always been on me to try to shoot it. She, literally from the first 2 weeks of us doing it, she wanted to try it, because she had heard from some of her friends that the feeling that you immediately get is, you know, intoxicating, I think was the word she used. And that a lot of her friends told us that we were, quote, wasting it, which I'm sure you've heard that before. You're listening to Beyond Dope. New episodes available every Friday. To email us with your questions or comments, please reach out to us at beyonddopepodcast@gmail.com. It didn't take long for a few of those people who were reaching out to tell me, you know, hey, I could give you a good deal if you buy 7 grams or 14 grams or things like that. And we would, you know, before you knew it, I was buying, 7 or 14 grams at a time, cutting the shit and selling it out of my parents' house. I mean, it progressed really quickly, and the connection that I had, I had 2 really good ones. I mean, this was a guy who, if I needed an ounce of dope, I could just go pick it up, even if I didn't have any money. I mean, at the time, I thought that connections like that maybe were all over the place. I was young and stupid, but those connections really don't exist, as I would find out once I lost this connection, and I mean, it's reputation too. Once you, in addiction, once you start screwing people over, I mean, they obviously stop trusting you pretty fast, and you can lose that trust really quickly. These were people who I had dealt with for years in weed or pills or things of that nature. So they knew if I told you I was going to be back with the money, I'd be back with the money, and usually that's how it went. I had a pretty good supply chain, and I would have them just pull right into the driveway and run it out to them. Sometimes I'd have Amber do it, if I wasn't home. Plus, I still had the bookie stuff going on, so I still had pretty good money coming in with that. So if my debt to my dealer went up a little bit, or if maybe I owed him $700, I mean, or $1,700, whatever. They knew that I was good for it, so there was never a time when I got cut off completely. So, but I crossed that line without even thinking about it at all. So, and I mean, really in no time, I was selling a lot of heroin and maintaining our habit, which is crazy, because you don't think you can do it, and then once you start doing it, and once you're around all those drugs, you just keep wanting more, and you keep wanting more, and just like the movies, once you get involved with something like that, it's all bad. Before you know it, you're doing way too much, and then what you're selling, you're cutting into just nothing. They're basically picking up baking soda from you because you already did all the drugs, because they can't keep up with you. So I mean, we had aggressively terrible habits, and that went on for maybe a year and a half, something like that, before I really exhausted a lot of my good connections. And if I wanted to sell, I had to, come up with the cash and go buy something. And even then, the connections weren't as good. The dope wasn't as good. So I ended up screwing that situation up. One thing I will say is I was terrified of needles, and that played a big part in, because we snorted heroin for years. I mean, we only used the needles for the last, I want to say, 2 years of our addiction. And, it was a long time of just snorting the drugs before we started shooting them. But I'm getting ahead of myself there. Once things ran out a little bit and I had to pay cash up front for the drugs, things changed big time. I was relying more heavily on, the money coming in from taking bets. I was relying wholly on, whatever shitty job I was working at the time. That check would come in and that check would be gone. Literally, I would pay somebody back with it or buy, $700 worth of dope with it, and someone would come over. I'd make $300 back. And I mean, it was just this cycle of just a terrible existence. I mean, but I mean, it progressively got worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. I mean, you know how that goes. And eventually, Amber started stealing stuff from really anywhere that she was, to be honest. But one of the big ones was from her grandparents. She took some gold necklaces, and I mean, this was really expensive shit. It was like $2,000 in gold that she took and went to go sell it at a pawn shop. Got the money, and we went and got high. Now, I would always tell her, like, we could find a different way. I was not, even in my addiction, I was not about stealing from family. I mean, but, there were definitely times when I would lie to whoever I was getting the money from about what I was using it for. So, I mean, isn't that stealing in itself? I couldn't go into somebody's jewelry box and just take their shit. Especially when, I mean, back then, let me change that, because back then I definitely could have done that, okay? But from family, I couldn't do that. I just couldn't bring myself to do that. But Amber knew that if she did it and then got back to the house with the money, what was I going to do? I'm not going to call them and tell them, hey, your granddaughter just stole necklaces from you for drug money, So that was the way she went about doing that most of the time. She would do it, and then I wouldn't find out that she did something until I got a call from some family member wondering if I saw this, or Amber told me, this is where she got that money from. But on this occasion, her parents actually got involved because her grandfather went to her father, and her father immediately came to our house. And I wasn't hiding it. I came right out with it. I wanted her to get help, and I was still, I was ignorant. I was ignorant. I was dumb. I was addicted. I was the worst version of myself, because I thought that if Amber got help at rehab, because I was working at the time, so I figured, okay, I'll keep working and I'll take care of our son, and she'll get clean, and I'll get clean while she's gone. I'll take Suboxone, I'll wean myself off, and that's what we'll do. Sounds good, right? I was young, I was stupid, and so she went away to rehab while I went to work, and I would go visit her on the weekends with our son. And that was a big mistake of mine. I should have just came out to everybody with everything that was going on. I should have let my son be, let my mom and our families watch over, our son, and we should have both went in and got help right then and there. Instead, I tried to keep working, and I tried to do it myself like an idiot, and it didn't work. I just got addicted to Suboxone, truly, and I was paying for that. So eventually I stopped taking Suboxone and got back on drugs. Then when Amber got out, we had maybe 4 or 5 days of sobriety. And by sobriety, I mean she's sober and I'm lying to her about Suboxone. And that would be a common theme for us throughout our addiction. It seemed like there was a lot of times when one person was ready to do it and the other person just was not. And it goes back to what we talked about with codependency. I mean, it makes it so hard because you're trying to take this person with you on this sobriety journey, and nobody's ever ready together. I feel. I mean, I did see a post the other day about this couple that made it, and that's so cool. I mean, congratulations to them. And every once in a while, you see or hear about these couples that made it through, or husband and wife or boyfriend and girlfriend that made it through, and that makes me. Really, that's got to be so fucking hard, and that is such an accomplishment. And I commend those people who can somehow make it through. God knows we tried every which way, and just like so many other people. And when you're in addiction, you're already not thinking clearly. So you're used to not listening to people's advice. I mean, so many people were trying to tell me, like, hey man, it doesn't work. You gotta be sober yourself first. Maybe you guys could find each other again, but you guys each have to be sober and separate for a decent amount of time, and then maybe reintroduce yourselves to each other. And I mean, you think, no, we don't need to do that. I'm the one, we're the couple that's going to make it, right? True love conquers all, and we're going to do this together, and we're going to, we're not like you guys, right? I mean, that's how everybody thinks, especially in addiction. And that's just not the case. I'd say, I mean, it's got to be a high percentage, but I mean, I don't know what it is. 95% of the time. I mean, most of the time it just doesn't work out for couples. But I'm way over time, so I'm gonna leave it there for today. Reach out to us, email. Please like us on Facebook. Keep putting one foot in front of the other, guys. One day at a time. Thanks.